Thank you, everybody. Nice to see you all. The title of my talk, the two words fell off. Utilizing technology as a force for good, as if. It is an honor to be here. I don't doubt you will hear and have already heard from figures far more qualified than I to talk about things technical, mathematical, financial, and corporate. If what I say seems obvious to you, you'll have to forgive me. But it's sometimes the obvious things that need the most repetition and reinforcement. It's why artists from Giotto to Goya, from Francis Bacon to Damien Hirst, so often remind us that we're going to die. It's obvious, we know it, but we need to be reminded. Let me begin with an image that you might be good enough to hold in your heads. A family is playing at the seaside. They sit on the beach with their backs to the sea, digging and making sandcastles, or perhaps they're playing beach cricket. But that's the image, a family on the beach, their backs to the sea. Store that away for a moment. Now let's talk about the hot-button issue of the day, AI. Incidentally, allow me, before we go any further, instantly to demand that from now on we always write and type this acronym, these initials, uppercase A, lowercase I. Otherwise, we're upsetting everyone in the world called Al. I've spoken to my old friend, Mr. Pacino. He's very much approving of my plan. He's fed up with reading that Al is a threat to our way of life, or the suggestion that it's only faintly possible in our lifetimes that Al will achieve some form of sentience. So, big I, big A, little I from now on. Anyway, AI is a subject I've been fervently fascinated by since the 1970s, when the great Marvin Minsky, the so-called father of artificial intelligence, laid out some of the groundwork for neural networks, what were then called expert systems as well, and other potential lines of approach. He founded the AI lab at MIT. His period of ascendancy was known as the AI winter, unfortunately. The joke was that AI of any usable kind was always 30 years away. Always on the horizon, never reached. Not because the science and mathematics weren't there, they were. It was the technology. There wasn't a world full of digital data for AI systems to mine back then. And there weren't powerful enough computers. But the ineluctable destiny of Moore's law, as I'm sure you know, dictated an exponential growth in computer processing power, along with similar curves of growth that brought us consistently increasing memory capacity, display resolutions, and all the other astonishments that we have had the dizzying pleasure of living through. It's hard to visualize the effect of this simple law that Gordon Moore propounded back in the 1960s. He was one of the founders of the company Integrated Electronics, or as we now call it, Intel. Every 18 months or thereabouts, he declared, the number of transistors that could be fitted onto a microchip would double. And he was right. Here's an example of what that actually means. 1996 was the year that Garry Kasparov, perhaps the greatest chess player ever to push a pawn, was defeated by IBM's Deep Blue machine. That year, 1996, the most powerful supercomputer in the world, more powerful by far than Deep Blue, was the ASCII Red, capable of more than 1 trillion floating point operations a second. ASCII Red stayed the most powerful computer until the year 2000. It cost $45 million, equivalent to about $75 million today. By the year 2006, all that processing speed of 1 teraflop per second was available in a Sony PlayStation 3. In other words, in just 10 years, the ASCII Red went from a $75 million supercomputer to the equal of the gaming console in a teenager's bedroom. And as you probably know, if you offered a child today a PlayStation 3, they would snort in your face derisively. That's why I think it's sometimes better to think of Moore's law expressing not so much an increase in power as a decrease in cost. Every year, what you can do with a computer gets cheaper and cheaper and therefore available to more and more. And now, thanks to all the fantastic quantities of data that have accumulated and all that doubling and redoubling of processing power, the AI winter is finally over and spring is sprung. Or is it? I gave a lecture on AI at the Hay on Wye Literary Festival 7 years ago, and amongst other things, I predicted that every smartphone app, every insurance company, credit rating firm, every basic digital service would soon start claiming AI to describe their functionality and their software offer, when in reality, they would be using good old algorithms in the usual way. And you will see that this has come to pass. Everything today is AI, but almost nothing is really. Incidentally, I should say that when I predicted, you should very much bear in mind that like every single other person interested in this field of human endeavor, I am an utterly hopeless prophet. Here's an example of how crap a predictor I can be. I excitedly joined the internet in the late 80s. It would be years before Tim Berners-Lee devised the World Wide Web. There was nothing graphical in those days in the net. The way in was to use a system called Telnet, to hop from university computer to university computer with the help of primitive search services like Gopher, Veronica, and Janet. Files could be uploaded and downloaded with a protocol called FTP. But when Tim did release the web, and those first Mosaic web browsers emerged, I began to believe and write that this new thing, this internet, was a gateway to an ideal new human future, an online world of museums, libraries, meeting squares, schools, cinemas, shopping arcades, notice boards, clubs, and parks for all kinds of play and gathering, and all free. Yes, there were a few dark alleys and red light districts, but what great city didn't have those? And with email and new forms of instant messaging, all the difficulties, disagreements, resentments, prejudices, bigotries, and horrors of political and social discord would melt away, and a new era of international understanding would flourish, banishing borders and enmities. Through the 90s and into the noughties, the public launch of Facebook, Twitter, everything became surely even more promising. A golden new Jerusalem was being builded here. No more wars, no more hatred. The internet was all gifted. In Greek, that's Pandora. And in myth, Pandora was given the best attributes of all the gods, so that she was indeed all gifted. Hurrah for the all-gifted internet. I should have remembered that Pandora had been given a box by the gods, who then told her never to open it. Actually, it was a jar, but common parlance calls it a box. Anyway, one night, she could not resist lifting the lid, and out flew hundreds of malicious sprites, leathery-winged creatures wheeling and shrieking as they flew off into the night to infest the golden world. They were misery, poverty, crime, disease, murder, war, cruelty, falsehood, viciousness, and violence. And they plague us to this day. When the lid was lifted from the Pandora's box of the internet, when exactly, we can't say. Maybe it was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, but by the time of 2016, coincidentally or not, the time of Brexit and Trump, it was clear that any rosy view of the internet was criminally naive. By now, out had flown all the malware, the bots, the criminals, the hackers, the groomers, exploiters, frauds, grifters, thieves, propagandists, and extortionists. When Pandora, in a panic, saw all the ugly sprites fly from her box, she slammed down the lid, unwittingly imprisoning the one last sprite in the box, which to this day is still beating its wings frantically against the sides, desperate to get out. And the name of that last sprite was Hope. Are things as bad as that for our Pandora's box? Is there no hope, No way out, no hope for a way out of the culture wars, the spirals of deceit, identity theft, abuse, bullying, fakery, and fraud. The AI of Marvin Minsky that I was so looking forward to. Can we be foolish enough again to believe in anything but disaster coming from it? Twice bitten, once shy, surely. Am I now dreading the horrors AI will bring, the amplification of everything dark and detrimental, the further and complete erosion of trust, security, and privacy, the further collapse of everything on which healthy, sane, productive social living depends? Was the internet merely the anti-John the Baptist heralding the arrival of AI, the anti-Messiah who will darken our world forever? Well, generative systems like the large language models that have expressed themselves into the public sphere recently as chatbots such as ChatGPT and its variants are not, of course, AI in any meaningful sense of intelligence. They've been splendidly described by the University of Washington computational linguist Emily Bender as no more than stochastic parrots that squawk their streams of output according to a probability determined by their access to such masses of data that their owners have been permitted to mine. Advanced autocorrects, in other words. The speed and apparent fluency of the squawking certainly gives the impression of intelligence and might even pass the Turing test, and certainly remarkable things can be achieved. Corners can be cut that save labor for report writers, students, paralegals, etc., etc. Visual generative models like Midjourney can make the eyes pop too. When Midjourney was asked a fairly simple question to generate 4 portraits of Stephen Fry in the style of the French impressionist Edouard Degas, best known for his paintings of ballet dancers, this is what the program came up with. Yeah, not bad, is it? Now, I'm a proud member of SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, and you may know that we've been on strike for close on 3 months now, and one of the burning issues at stake is AI. In case you're wondering why, let me play you my voice reading a documentary narration, just a clip. First, as it actually is, my voice, and then an AI version, to give an idea of what we're talking about in this field. So here's a short extract of me performing the commentary for a film about a Dutch resistance group's fight against the Nazis.
In 1937, Lau Mazirel, a Dutch human rights lawyer, goes to the Paris World Exposition. It is there she hears a lecture by 2 German scientists on how they intend to purify the German race. Lau immediately travels to Germany, where she discovers Hitler is building training camps, which are effectively the nascent beginnings of what would later become concentration camps. Lau knows that the Dutch population census records every citizen's religion. She warns the Dutch government that if this information falls into Nazi hands, it will spell disaster for Dutch Jews. The government chooses to ignore her warnings. 14th of May, 1940. Germany invades the Netherlands. Reichskommissar Arthur Seyss-Inquart appoints SS Hauptsturmführer Ferdinand Aus der Funten to ensure that the Netherlands is cleansed of Jews.
Right, so there we are. Now let's hear the AI version. No, because that was the AI version. I said not one word of that. It was a machine. Yes, it shocked me. They used my reading of just 7 audiobooks, the Harry Potter novels, and from that data set, an AI of my voice was created, and it made that new narration. What I played you included, as you heard, a variety of German and Dutch names and general vocabulary. Hauptsturmführer, for example, Arthur Seyss-Inquart. All those names and all those words, of course, are not in Rowling's books. What you heard was not the result of a mashup. There are plenty of those, and they're completely obvious. This is from a flexible, artificial voice where the words are modulated to fit the meaning of each sentence uniquely. It could therefore have me read anything from a call to storm Parliament to hard porn or a product endorsement, all without my knowledge. And this, which you just heard, was done without my knowledge and without my permission. When 6 months or so I heard about this, I sent it to my agents on both sides of the Atlantic, and they went ballistic. They had no idea that such a thing was possible. But I had to say something to them, which I have to say to you. You ain't seen nothing yet. This is audio. It won't be long before full deepfake video is just as convincing. It already is, but at a cost which will soon tumble down into the realm of free or as good as. These generative AI tricks, the so-called AI chatbots and the like that we now have, the bolt-on so-called AI modules that are being sold to companies and individuals everywhere, we have to think of them as being like Carl Benz's first working automobile in 1895. Impressive, but by no means the finished article. Goodness, a motor and engine that isn't steam and which can pull a whole carriage, no horse. How impressive. But it'll never replace the horse. It's clumsy, smelly, and unreliable. Well, yes, automobiles were in 1895. For the next decade or so, to drive them, you had to understand how they worked. You had to be prepared to get out and get under every mile or so and tweak the magneto or the carburation. Nobody imagined interstate highways, motorway service stations, motels, 10-story parking structures, car ferries, and whole towns and economies that were founded on the idea of that belching, sputtering Carl Benz motor, all in the lifetime of my grandfather. Technology is not a noun. It is a verb. It is always moving. What we have now is not what will be. And when it comes to AI models that can improve themselves, what we have now will advance at a faster rate than any technology we have yet seen. So never, ever judge a new gizmo, device, gadget, system, or notion by what it is. I was lucky enough to know Steve Jobs quite well. He was not an engineer, he was not a businessman, at least not as much of a one as his successor Tim Cook is. He was not a scientist. He was not an industrial designer like his friend and colleague, the great Johnny Ive. He was a visionary, which sounds a flabby word, but it means he saw things that others didn't. He envisioned them, as Americans like to say. A favorite quote of his was from the great Canadian hockey player Wayne Gretzky. When Gretzky was asked why he was so much better a player than anyone else in the NHL, Gretzky said, "Other players skate to the puck. I skate to where the puck is going to be." Steve skated to where the puck was going to be. So let's look at two aspects of AI as a technology. One that is common to all inventions and another that is unique to AI. Technology has, as philosophers say, no moral valency. Take Gutenberg and his development of movable type printing. Before his printing press in 1450, all written material in the world was done by hand, by monks and clerks. After him, printed matter flooded the world. His machine unleashed everything that made us, from the Age of Reason through the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution, everything. But no moral valency in the machine itself. The same dumb press can print the sonnets of Shakespeare on Monday and Hitler's Mein Kampf on Tuesday. The technology unthinkingly complies to the wishes and ethos, the moral valency of the operator. The microphone and radio station doesn't know if it's Gandhi broadcasting or Joseph Goebbels. A gun does not know its target. The difference with AI systems is that unlike guns and printing presses, they must have moral valency, which is to say, we insist that they must. We feel that if they don't, we're doomed. Unsupervised machine learning is an immensely powerful technology. Systems can teach themselves games with bewildering speed. But why must AI systems be taught moral values, you ask? Well, we all in this great venue, I would suggest, surely agree that an AI should know that human life is of supreme importance, that men and women are of equal value, that all humans are of equal value, whatever their gender, race, skin color, sexuality, level of education, class, upbringing, religion, non-religion, political beliefs, or even criminal record, that children deserve a special kind of respect and protection, that we all have the right to free assembly, free speech, free thought, individual opinions. It's taken us centuries to come to this conclusion. We would therefore want AI to attach more credence to, say, John Stuart Mill's masterpiece On Liberty or Thomas Paine's The Rights of Man than it would to the aforementioned Mein Kampf or fakes like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. After all, without our guidance, AI might be that in its endless, unsupervised scraping for all data, all human exchanges and records that fill the whole wide internet, an AI system might come to different conclusions. As it, a machine without any moral sense, scoops up the data from the weirder corners of social media, it may absorb some of the prejudices out there in the darkest, slimiest, and most festering pools of racial supremacy, ultra-radical religious fundamentalism, toxic masculinity, etc., etc. Some of the slime might stick. So, as in the original great science fiction novels of Asimov and others, we install primary directives in the AI, similar to the famous laws of robotics. Primary directives which cleave to the human rights that we value. Primary directives it cannot transgress. We'll pass over the inconvenient fact that we can't agree on those values. It's not like the days of the writing of the US Constitution when there was a broad Enlightenment consensus. But we'll glide over that, for it gets worse. Because wait, what use is the building of a just and moral AI? China is building AI systems of equal, if not greater power than those in the academic, governmental, and private sectors of the West. They believe, and why shouldn't they, that their AI should have their values baked in. Values making clear that the Communist Party of China matters more than any individual, that the citizens' first duty is not to themselves, but to the state, that to question or criticize the state, the party, its functionaries, and its leaders is treason, that it is right and admirable to report neighbors who say bad things about communism, who question the party, who make jokes about the leader, who spread Western ideas. The free press, alternative sexualities, and art free from censorship are pernicious Western decadences that deserve to be suppressed. So we must wake up and smell the lapsang souchong. There can be no question that China is building exactly such systems with exactly such values, and that these systems will massively increase the state's ability to enforce them. Nor will their AI be sandboxed or ring-fenced outside the world internet that we use. It will crawl into and contaminate every corner of our digital world. Chinese mobile networks and social media services, TikTok for example, are already permeated and around our own world of the internet, and that will only continue. Russian AI will do the same according to the lights of its values, grotesque as we may think them. And on top of that, we have a deeper problem, for the champions of our Western values will, rightly, we think, insist that we weaken, not strengthen, our Western AI's power to scrutinize, surveil, spy, report, and limit the freedom of our own citizens, which will perforce make China's big brother AI, with no such scruples, stronger than ours, more far-reaching and all-encroaching. This is an arms race where uniquely we in the West will deliberately choose less powerful weapons than our adversaries across the world. If we didn't do that, It would mean surrendering our values to theirs. In other words, in order to achieve parity with our rivals, our perceived enemies, we would have to adopt their ethical and moral frameworks. And yet it is the difference between their ethical and moral frameworks and ours that is the reason we think our system of democracy, openness, free speech, etc., so superior and so worth defending. These are exactly the problems that we faced in the Cold War. Writers like John le Carré often portrayed the bind that we were in, our spies and their controllers being forced to become no less ruthless, no less secretive, dishonest, cruel, and treacherous than the wicked opposition. For our system of tolerance, openness, and freedom to prevail, we have to suspend our tolerance, openness, and freedom. Nice. So whichever way you slice it, AI will constrict our freedom, security, and our privacy, all in the name of protecting our freedom, security, and privacy. Is there a way through this? We've talked about Carl Benz and his automobile. The fact is that almost from the very beginning, we controlled how people were allowed to drive cars, and we still do. There's a driving test, an age requirement, a driving license, an insurance imperative, laws on intoxicating substances at the wheel. We tell citizens on which side of the road they may drive. We impose speed limits, emission limits, tire tread standards. We insist on the installation of certain safety features like seatbelts, crumple zones, and airbags. There are still deaths on the road, but by and large, those rules keep us safe and allow traffic to more or less to move and flow safely. The right to fly an aircraft is even more curtailed and circumscribed. With broadcasting, another exceptionally powerful technology, we insist on levels of fairness, balance, truthfulness, decency, etc. At various times, what is considered decent is adjusted to the prevailing mode. So language, nudity, and violence that would have been utterly unacceptable on television in the 70s is now fine. On the other hand, representations of women, ethnic minorities, or gay people that were acceptable a generation ago are not so today. We can just about manage to navigate our way through the conflict between this need to control broadcasting and the need to allow freedom of expression. It isn't easy. BBC directors general often fall on their swords or get booted out. All left-wing people think the BBC is biased to the right. All right-wingers think it's a hotbed of lefties. In the wider media, the controls that govern good practice in the press can sometimes seem like shackling. Sometimes they can seem to allow press barons to impose themselves on our democracy in less than satisfactory ways. We're used to all this, used to trying to square the circle and maintain the right balances. Can we do something similar in the field of AI? Can we demand the kind of rules, regulations, and oversight that seem natural with motoring and television? Ofcom, Oftel, Ofsted, Off-AI? By happy coincidence, while I was writing this yesterday, Elon Musk, Sam Altman of OpenAI, Mark Zuckerberg, and others convened in Washington to announce that there is overwhelming consensus on AI regulation. If such dyed-in-the-wool Randian libertarians are in favor of government intervention and control, that must mean something. But the guardrails and guidelines that they're calling to be legislated into existence won't work abroad. And as ever, politicians insist on talking about technology as a noun, not as a verb. They keep skating to the puck. And there's another snag. The BBC was founded and motoring unwound as a way of life in days of hierarchy, when society was run by figures derived from long-established positions of more or less accepted authority. Society and its institutions were governed by people who, if they were not always respected, were usually obeyed and seemed born to govern and to regulate by virtue of education and, mad as it seems to us now, birth and accent. Now we live in a different world. Thank goodness for that, it goes without saying. We do not trust governments or educated elites any more, frankly, than we trust Silicon Valley bros. But it does mean, unfortunately, that we trust no one. No one is in charge. There appear to be no grown-ups, no one whose word we can trust, no one whose judgment, whose honor, whose moral valency we can believe in. David Attenborough, that's about it. Do you remember at the beginning of this, I asked you to hold an image in your mind? A family is playing at the seaside, I said. They sit on the beach, their backs to the sea, making sandcastles. Well, that family is us, the human family. We're playing with our backs to the ocean, and out there, way out there at sea, different currents are swelling. They are the currents of astounding new technologies: quantum computing, nanobots, robotics, brain-machine interfacing, where the human mind can control a computer, and in the other direction, computers can read and control human minds. Musk is working on these and claims great success already. Bio-augmentation, bionics, genomics, CRISPR gene editing, stem cells, revolutionary new materials like gallium arsenide and graphene. They're the tip of the iceberg. Each of these currents, each of these technologies, especially when amplified and assisted by AI in all its modalities, has the potential on its own to be existentially transformative in the human world. But joined with the others in a great confluence, they will rise and rush towards the shore. A tsunami is massing and massing while we still play and build our sandcastles. Even though we can now begin to hear its roar, we'd rather not turn round. Thank you very much. Governments and political parties talk and prepare budgets and lay out plans and election manifestos for a world, a polity, way of life and work that will very shortly no longer exist. And all this is coming at the same time as a climate change catastrophe. It seems to be a question of which of these horsemen of the apocalypse will catch us first. Just as the heat domes and the flash floods and the droughts and hurricanes will come and keep on coming, so will the waves of new technology. Ungoverned and ungovernable, we will just have to see what happens. We must hope that all the good outcomes, the medical advances, pharmaceutical designs, protein-folding mysteries solved and astounding discoveries made, the neat solutions to logistical and other problems that have plagued us for years, the new ways to educate children, house and rehabilitate criminals, that all these will outweigh the bad things, the surveillance, the unemployment, the malignant powers abroad and at home that will hack and despoil, pervert the truth, manipulate and exploit us. For ironically, perhaps, it is AI, for all its threats, that will offer the best chance for a solution to itself. And it is to be hoped to the climate apocalypse too. So, I'll end this by talking about the singularity. For I think my beloved Greek myths have a solution here, at least as a way of thinking about it. The singularity, as you know, is probably the name given to the moment that AI achieves sapience, from artificial general intelligence to human-like self-consciousness, the singularity. Well, we were created by Prometheus, the Titan, the immortal, friend of Zeus, the king of the gods, and he loved us very much. And Zeus put up with us. We were small, we were articulate, we were not like other animals exactly, but we weren't like the gods at all. And he said that we could survive and we could live so long as we never were given fire. Fire only lived for the gods. By fire, he meant literally fire, the fire that roasts and toasts, that melts and smelts, the fire that allows technology to transform the materials of the world. But he also meant the divine fire, the self-consciousness, the awareness, the creative spirit that made the gods better than humans. Well, Prometheus loved us so much that he disobeyed Zeus, and he went to Olympus, and with a fennel stalk, he stole fire, and he took it down and he gave it to mankind. And Zeus, looking down one evening, saw the spots of light everywhere and realized that man had fire and was terrified because he knew that one day they would unseat the gods, because now they had the God's secret, this divine ability to be aware of the self, to separate yourself completely from animals. So he punished Prometheus by chaining him to a mountainside, sending an eagle to peck out his liver every day. Of course, it grew back every night because he was immortal. Well, it's an interesting myth about creation, that the humans are sort of like little gods, and then we became gods and we got rid of the gods. And indeed, the Greeks did get rid of the gods, in a sense. They started to believe in themselves, in their own power to add and subtract and to think and solve problems and be little gods as humans. And by the time we did this in the 18th century, we threw off the shackles of ecclesiasticism and the power of the church, and the Enlightenment blossomed. Prometheus became our hero. Beethoven wrote The Creatures of Prometheus. Shelley wrote Prometheus Unbound. And his wife, Mary Shelley, wrote Frankenstein, subtitled The Modern Prometheus. They regarded the Prometheus myth as being about them throwing off the gods and standing up and being human. But actually, it's now that it matters, because we have the same problem that Prometheus and Zeus had. Here are these entities that we have created, just as Zeus and Prometheus created mankind. At the moment, they're clever little parrots squawking around with no real self-consciousness or awareness of self. And there are Prometheuses amongst us who want to give that spark. And there are Zeuses amongst us who are terrified of the possibility. So we have to decide, each of us, if we're a Prometheus or a Zeus. There's no right answer, but the one thing we can all agree on is that it's a fucking weird time to be alive. Thank you. Thank you very much.